Star Wars Jedi Starfighter is the sequel to vehicle-based action video game Star Wars Starfighter, and also serves as the conclusion for the Starfighter subseries overall. Although there are a few notable differences, inclusions, and improvements from that game to this one, they are both very similar to one another. Both games swap the player between vehicles and protagonists across the story. Both feature a variety of different space and land-based levels, each with unique primary and secondary objectives, and both have narratives that directly tie in with, act as build-ups to, and contextualize each of the epic final battles in their respective films. For Jedi Starfighter, it's the Geonosis battle from Attack of the Clones, and I think it's every bit as good a tie-in game as its predecessor was, but maybe not as tightly knit narratively speaking. More on that later. One major difference, however, is that instead of the trio of playable heroes we had in the first game, our playable protagonists have been reduced to just 2 this time around. Of course, as one could easily surmise from the title of the game itself, one of our new leads is in fact a Jedi, and in particular, Jedi Master Adi Gallia.
Now move!
You heard the lady, everyone out!
This isn't Adi Gallia's first video game appearance though, as we've already covered her inclusion in Jedi Power Battles, but it is the first time where she really takes the spotlight in a leading role with lots of personality and dialogue to drive the plot forward. Master Gallia herself is a Tholothian from the planet Tholoth, and has trained as a Jedi to the point of not only becoming a Jedi Master, but also being granted a place on the Jedi Council itself. Due to her skill and insight, she selected to test out the experimental new Delta 7 Aether Sprite class Light Interceptor, or more commonly known as the Jedi Starfighter, a new ship prototype commissioned by the Jedi Council to assist the Jedi Order in their various excursions to aid in Republic affairs across the galaxy. The other playable character is a familiar face returning from the first Starfighter game, the Fioran pirate named Nim. Not much has changed in the 10 years since we last saw Nim. He's still leading his group of pirates he calls the Revenants. He's still short-tempered, hard-headed, and hell-bent on leading the life of a pirate, and he's still got a bone to pick with the Trade Federation. Vanna Sage does also make an appearance near the end of the game as an NPC to aid in one of the later battles, but she isn't playable this time around and plays a much smaller role overall. I suspect she was intended to be playable in the planned third Starfighter game, but I'll get to that later. First, I want to talk about ports.
It was created exactly to your specifications.
Jedi Starfighter initially only saw release for the PlayStation 2 and Microsoft Xbox all the way back in 2002, launching roughly 2 months apart in March for the PS2 and May for the Xbox. LucasArts developed the game for the PS2 with Secret Level returning to handle the Xbox port, just like with the original Starfighter game. Only this time, no PC port was ever released, which has left this sequel stranded on console hardware for the foreseeable future. Sometime later, it was released digitally to both the PS3 and 4 via emulation. Also, it was made backwards compatible on the Xbox 360, but when played on the 360, unfortunately suffered various bugs that plagued the experience. As for emulating it on the PC, well, there's not really a good way to go about it, unfortunately. Unlike the first game, the Xbox port here is pretty much a no-go right now so far as I can tell. For some reason, there's a major issue with the frame rate that basically makes the game unplayable, and despite trying a few workarounds to see if I could resolve it, I couldn't seem to make a dent. Luckily, there's really only one difference between the two versions this time around, so you're not missing much content by playing the PS2 version instead, beyond one bonus level, but even then, trying to emulate the PS2 port has issues of its own.
If you run into trouble, we can't promise the cavalry.
The Force will be my guide.
And may it protect you as well.
The PS2 version is technically playable in full via emulation, but it's got a few problems. For instance, the dialogue pretty much never plays in the post-mission cutscenes, which is a bummer, and there are a few areas where the game seems to struggle with the frame rate here and there, although it's never game-breaking by any stretch. Realistically though, this iteration is really only held back by one enormous glitch that soft-locks you from progressing a little over halfway through the game. Near the end of the game's second act, there's a mission called Hammer and Anvil that basically cannot be completed due to a glitch that causes a scripted event to break. The glitch in question involves a freighter that is supposed to sacrifice itself by crashing into a shield generator, destroying both itself and the target, thus allowing the player to progress, instead flying the opposite direction of said shield generator. Meaning the player is kinda just stuck and can't do anything but fly around or quit. After doing some reading on it, this glitch can apparently also happen on the PS3 and 4 versions of the game, since those are also running on a form of emulation, but there is reportedly a small random chance it won't happen at all for some reason. Although it appears the vast majority of the time, it does seem to occur, and despite multiple attempts on my end, I always encountered this glitch. The easiest workaround, unfortunately, is to punch in a cheat code that unlocks everything for you and then just skip this mission altogether. I don't love this though. Both of these Starfighter games have a really satisfying gameplay loop to me, which made playing through and unlocking everything in the first game organically a very satisfying experience. So it did kind of lessen the intended effect of subsequent missions after this a bit, since I knew there was no reason to try and fulfill the bonus objectives anymore given everything was already unlocked anyway. Because of these issues, the best way to play this game remains analog hardware via the PS2 or Xbox, but this fact does make an even stronger case for the game to get a proper remaster than the first game, since it would be nice to have a fully functioning iteration both on PC and a higher quality version for modern consoles. I'll talk more about why this game needs a remaster shortly, but first, I want to talk about the story. By the way, if you haven't already seen it, then I recommend checking out my breakdown on the first Starfighter game as well to catch up on the lore of this series and its characters. If you guys are enjoying this video so far and want to support my endeavor to cover every single Star Wars game on the PS2, then hit that like button and drop a comment, since those are the #1 most important things you can do to support the channel. Thanks again for all of your support, everyone.
The prototype is quite effective.
And I was only flying at half speed, but it still needs rigorous combat testing.
Jedi Starfighter opens on a cutscene of the game's primary antagonist on the bridge of his own capital ship as he has a conversation with Count Dooku. Oh, wait, sorry, I mean Count Dooku.
Ah, Count Dooku.
This new character is Captain Kavik Toth, leader of the mercenary group called Saboeth Squadron. That's Saboeth, which is not to be confused with Seaboeth. That's a whole other thing for a different video. Toth and his squadron have been overseeing the development of a new kind of weapon for the Trade Federation, and ultimately what will become the Confederacy of Independent Systems to use in the upcoming war they know is on the horizon. Meanwhile, back on Coruscant, Adi Gallia meets with Master Mace Windu as she is told of Trade Federation activity in the remote Carthax system.
To my knowledge, the Carthax system is remote and lawless. Whatever the Trade Federation is doing there, it can't be legal.
I agree.
So with this settled, Addie hops into her new Starfighter and flies out to meet with a contact who can take her to meet the Fioran pirate named Nim. Man, I gotta say real quick, I love this. It's so rare we get to play proper Jedi missions like this because most of these games are centered around major events, but being a Jedi investigating potential illegal activity pre-Clone Wars is so fun to me. This leads us into Mission 1, where the informant we're meeting turns out to be old Reddy from the first game. Guess he's still running with Nim all these years later, but unfortunately, he was followed.
Wait a moment, I'm picking up readings of incoming craft. You've been followed.
What? Are you kidding? I once outran 16 droid starfighters on Naboo. It would be impossible for... Oh boy, we're in trouble.
This is a pretty short mission, as we just take out a handful of different enemy fighters, and Addie ends up blowing up a C-9979 landing craft, and following Reddy to Maramir, where the next few missions will be taking place. Keep that name in your mind, because Maramir is a central planet to Nim's character both in this game and beyond. Reddy upholds his promise and guides Addie to meet Nim, but unfortunately Nim and his crew are in the middle of a pirate raid to steal entry codes to an orbital base they're hoping to commandeer. Also, Nim is very displeased that Reddy would involve a Jedi in their affairs.
A Jedi? Reddy, are you insane?
I like this mission a lot. It reminds me of Naboo, but it's different enough to feel like a new planet in its own right. Maramir isn't super lore-dense, since it's mostly only relevant to the Starfighter sub-series, and is a sparsely populated resort planet even at its best, but outside of its heavy relevance across both Jedi Starfighter and the Starfighter Crossbones comics, it also showed up in the Star Wars Obsession comic run, which looks really cool and I need to read soon. Throughout this level, we have to fight off a horde of Trade Federation enemies to protect Nim's lieutenant, Jenkins, as he attempts to slice into and steal the aforementioned codes they came here for. I know the Jedi aren't exactly friendly with the Trade Federation after that whole trying to occupy Naboo thing, but deliberately helping a pirate group raid one of their bases to steal their codes is amusingly partial for a group that considers themselves to be keepers of the peace. With the codes they need in hand, hand, Nim rounds up his crew and flies out to free a bunch of their gang from a Trade Federation space station creatively named Space Station 1138. This is a reference to George Lucas's first feature film called THX 1138, a dark dystopian sci-fi film from 1971. The 1138 number has gone on to be used by Lucas frequently in other things, including Star Wars of course, so it's fun when it pops up in small instances like this. Addy agrees to help Nim and his crew with their assault on the station as they guide a freighter piloted by Captain Orsai, another of Nim's pirate gang, who will prove himself invaluable to the game's plot. We take control of Nim for this mission and get to play with his ship called the Havoc again, which seems like it'd be nice after we got so familiar with it in the first game, but unfortunately, I tended not to enjoy his missions. I already didn't love using this thing in the first Starfighter game, but when put next to how fun it is to fly the Jedi Starfighter, it just makes it feel even slower, clunkier, and overall less enjoyable than before. And since there's only like 2 playable protagonists in the game, you'll have to use this for like 45% of the story. It's not the end of the world, and it is still a fun ship, but I don't think Nim is a cool enough character or his ship is a fun enough vehicle to have warranted the amount of love these 2 games were trying to give them. I'll talk more about that later. Once they free their prisoners and escape, everyone heads back to Marmir. The Trade Federation has installed a sensor station in the alcove that they've been using to track the movements of Nim's Revenant gang, and so Nim has decided to destroy it, and Addy Gallia is lending them her aid. It's another cool mission, honestly. We protect these ships while taking out a bunch of targets. It's your standard fare Starfighter combat loop. A particularly frustrated Nemoidian named Haro Rook even comes out to fight us one-on-one, but it doesn't really go all that well for him.
It will take more than that to stop me. No!
Also, I need to say that the audio mixing in this game is awful. I turned the music and sound effects down with the dialogue maxed, and I still couldn't hear what they were trying to say half the time, and if I turn them down any lower, it just makes the whole game feel extra quiet. No idea why this is. I feel like I remember it being an issue in the first game's PS2 version as well, but why would they not have fixed it by now is the real question. He gets away in an escape pod, by the way, but that won't save him. Much like how the first game integrated CGI cutscenes throughout the story, Jedi Starfighter continues that trend with several even better looking CG cutscenes. Although unlike the first game, the second game's cutscenes lean heavier on showing us the antagonist than before. Part of this is because we actually have a clear antagonist this time. I think overall we still get more protagonist-centered cutscenes, but they do show us a lot of our villain, Kavik Toth. What you're seeing here is Toth speaking with 3 Nemoidians from the Trade Federation about the new trihexalon weapon they've been developing together.
Have you tested it?
Not yet, but we believe it will be quite effective. That vial alone could kill 300 Wookiees, and it does not affect our droids. It's the perfect weapon for Dooku's new army.
They reveal that they've been behind on their production, but are redoubling their efforts to produce the hyper-deadly weapon, and this frustrates Toth as he informs them that his people will be taking over production. And then he kills them with it. Had to make sure the audience remembered he's the bad guy after all, and killing your own allies is a classic bad guy move. Also, that Twi'lek is named Lieutenant Bella, and she actually matters later, so keep her in mind. She gets less screen time than Toth does though, so if you're not paying attention, you won't even realize you're fighting her later. I sure didn't. Anyway, Toth loads up some ships with a bunch of trihexalon missiles and sends Bella to launch them at a nearby city on Marmir to test their efficacy.
Commence bombardment. Let's see how these vermin burn.
Meanwhile, Addy tells Nim that she senses a disturbance in the Force and breaks off from Nim and his crew to go investigate the nearby city of Point Modi with Reddy. Now, overall, the Starfighter games feel pretty different from the Rogue Squadron games. Well, as different as third-person arcade-like vehicle-based action games can feel from one another, that is. That said, this mission in particular really did feel like a Rogue Squadron mission, and I mean that in a good way, actually. I'm not really sure why it gave me that vibe. Maybe it's the city we're fighting over to protect like we saw in a few Rogue Squadron missions. Which is a major part of the level actually, because those trihexalon missiles are raining down on Point Modi by the dozen, and it's up to Addy and Reddy to shoot them out of the sky while the city is evacuated.
I thought hex weapons were banned by the Republic.
They are ready.
Lieutenant Bella bails while Addy and Reddy stay focused on protecting the city by shooting down the rest of the missiles, some hex bombers, and even a few Saboth freighters. It's a cool mission, and I can't even fully explain why, but it's one of my favorites in the game. It's so simple, and feels like it hits that sweet spot of what Jedi Starfighter wants to be. With that done, we're put back in control of Nim as he and Jenkins lead a Revenant assault on the Trade Federation's mining facility built across Mount Mirakan. Look at this little fella, what's he up to down there? There's not much to say about this level narratively speaking, but man, it's cool flying around this mountain and blowing things up. That's really just about all there is to do though, besides blowing up these freighters to get that bonus objective. This is happening at the same time Reddy and Addy are defending Point Modi, and you hear them talking back and forth as Nim acknowledges that he knows about Captain Toth and his Saboth squadron.
Kavik Toth. He might be more dangerous than me.
No kidding, I'm out!
Once the mining operation is in ruins, Nim and his crew relink with Addy and Reddy as they all work together and make for the planet Nod Kartha, where the Trihexalon manufacturing facility is. Nim has agreed that the Trihexalon weapons are too great a threat to leave unchecked, and plans to help Addy destroy them. Unfortunately, the planet has a defense grid that knocks one of Nim's freighters out of commission.
Everyone pull back. It's too well defended.
In this mission, we're back to Addy and her Jedi Starfighter, and it's actually a major narrative moment for the game, marking not only the halfway point, but also the moment where several crucial events happen. Which is why it's such a shame that this is the mission that breaks across most emulated versions of the game, making it a mission all but guaranteed to softlock your progression. I mean, come on, Jango Fett shows up in this level and we can even take some shots at him. You're telling me that this is the mission that breaks?
Reddy has a bounty on him?
For what? You'll not escape.
Neither will you.
Yeah, so it turns out our good Tordarian friend, Reddy, has a bounty on him, and during this mission, Jango Fett chases him around before Reddy makes the jump to lightspeed, and because Jango wasn't prepared to be caught between 3 fighting factions, he isn't able to secure his bounty and bails out of there.
This is your fight, not mine.
You can't do this. We have a contract.
Yeah, it's a super brief cameo, but it's still pretty cool to see the Slave One flying around the battlefield. Between the Trade Federation, Saboth Squadron, and the massive cannons taking shots at him, Captain Orsai decides to set his ship on a collision course to crash into and take out one of the shield generators, allowing our heroes through the planetary defense grid. Or, well, that's what's supposed to happen on a functioning version of this game. Assuming that does happen though, Addy, Nim, and the rest of the Revenants press on to the surface of Nod Kartha to find and destroy the Trihexalon manufacturing facility.
My demo team must infiltrate each bunker in order to blow the shield generators. Until then, we can't touch the plant, and Toth will keep cranking out Trihexalon.
It's your command. I'll do what I can to protect you.
Level 8 is another favorite of mine from this game, and it's incredibly simple. That massive structure is the manufacturing plant the Trade Federation and Saboth Squadron has been using to create the Trihexalon weapons, and it's currently being guarded by a series of individual shield generators, each hidden in a separate bunker that Nim and his ground unit has to enter, set charges, and blow up. Basically, all we're doing here is destroying a bunch of ground vehicles and units like tanks, stabs, and just regular droids. Unfortunately, Nim and his crew get trapped inside one of the bunkers while trying to blow it up, which leads to another of the game's excellent cutscenes depicting Addy Gallia leaping out of her Starfighter and dismantling some droids so she can rush the bunker and save Nim and his people. We even get a Qui-Gon style scene of her saber cutting a hole in the door, and the same track from that part of the Phantom Menace even plays. It's great, I love it. Easily one of the most memorable parts of the game for me. With the shields down, we're given control of Nim again as we launch a full-scale assault on the factory. This level is another simple one. We basically clear the landing pad of the facility, fend off what feels like a few hundred enemy units, fly into the factory, and drop some bombs. I also like this part where we have to shoot the control boxes of these laser reflectors to redirect them so we can open the blast doors to the factory's main reactor, and then put the production of Trihexalon weapons to a permanent end. This is the end of what the game calls Act 2, and it's where the plot starts to get a little bit splintered. Addy Gallia tells Nim that she has to leave them as she's been called to assist the Jedi in rescuing Obi-Wan on Geonosis, which is where the game begins its tie-in with Attack of the Clones.
Good luck, Nim.
Don't need it, but thanks anyway. And may the Force be with you, Jedi.
Addy Gallia and Nim will not be interacting directly again until the very end, and as we swap between the two perspectives, we'll essentially be wrapping up 2 separate subplots that kind of tie in together to form the game's overarching narrative. The first of these subplots revolves around Nim being determined to reclaim their old home base on the planet Locke. You remember, the one they self-destructed in the first game.
You heard me. Do it!
And the rest of Nim's missions will be centered around accomplishing this, which basically means his actions from here on out are irrelevant to the game's overall story, with the exception of one minor event that I'll point out when we get to it. I do not like this mission at all, by the way. Not only do I not really enjoy piloting Nim's clunky starship, but doing so now doesn't even contribute to the game's larger events or a story that I care about. It's just a resolution to Nim's own vendetta against the Trade Federation and his desire to reclaim his old base. Nim's Revenant gang spends the whole level fighting off a few of Toth's ships still lingering in the system while they steal some parts to an orbital defense cannon they're hoping to take over, and, well, that's it. I hesitate to say this mission should have been cut, because this game is already pretty short as it is, and having lopped off an entire level would leave it with only 14 total, and 15 just feels like such a more complete number of levels to have in your campaign. So what I'll say instead is that they should have replaced this level with another Adigalia mission that expanded more on the Battle of Geonosis. I mean, come on, the game is literally called Jedi Starfighter. Do you think anyone would have cared if the devs skewed the playtime a little more in the titular vehicle's direction? As it stands, 8 levels are dedicated to Adi, with 7 given to Nim, which is too close to an even split for a game called Jedi Starfighter, where only just slightly over half of the game's campaign lets you fly it. I know it's a silly thing to care about, but I just do not think Hayden Blackman's OC Nim here is nearly interesting enough to warrant all of the screen time he gets. And I really like Blackman as a writer, by the way. I even think this game has a pretty good story, actually. I'll talk more about this shortly, let's just move on for now. Getting back to Adigalia, where we can fly the ship that's actually on the cover art, the tie-in part of the game finally occurs as we exit hyperspace in orbit of Geonosis, and don't worry, I'll address that lore problem later too.
New Moon copies, Master Gallia.
Siri, it's good to hear your voice again.
You'll change your mind about that once you hear the mission, Master. Lock on my coordinates.
That is Siri Taki, or Tachi. I'm not really sure how it's pronounced. Adigalia's former Jedi apprentice, one of Obi-Wan's love interests, and incredibly underrated / underutilized character. Going by Legends lore anyway, which I always do. I'm pretty sure this is her only video game appearance, which makes it feel special. She's a great character. If you're wanting to know more about that Obi-Wan love interest thing, by the way, it was a subplot in a novel called Secrets of the Jedi. Anyway, back to the game. This mission has us fighting a bunch of droid starfighters in the asteroid belt of Geonosis, which is kinda awesome, not gonna lie. Giving Adi a force power that emulates Jango Fett's seismic charge is so stupid, but also who cares? It's both awesome and very fitting here. Albeit useless. I do not ever use this ability. That's pretty much the gist of it though. We just fight alongside Siri to defend the clone troopers as they close in on the planet. Still, such an incredible set piece for fans of the second film. The set piece in Mission 12 is pretty cool too, as we clear the defenses from one of Locke's moons where the orbital cannon Nim's been trying to get access to this whole time is located. I was still tired of using Nim's ship by this point, but overall, playing around this moon was so fun and memorable that I didn't even care. I already thought the way it was implemented was impressive, but my sentiment was further reinforced when I listened to the developer commentary and heard how proud the team was to have pulled this off.
The first time that I saw the moon, Pat's moon, kind of in place, immediately felt different than any other mission I played before because of that location. And I remember kind of back in the mission brainstorming days where we were thinking of unique different places to be, and we're like, yeah, it'd be cool if we, could fly all the way around and it was curved, and and there was a top and a bottom, and we could do so many different types of gameplays with that. So I mean, that's the most exciting thing when I play this mission, I think, let alone all the beautiful stuff that we see too.
And then some of the problems that caused for the gameplay is...
Yeah, I didn't worry about that, I just let Troy do it.
Once control of the cannon is acquired, we get to aim it at a Trade Federation cruiser and hit the delete button, which is fun.
Firing!
Furious!
Meanwhile, Adi and Siri are on guard duty in this mission aptly titled Attack of the Clones. Seeing Geonosis in atmosphere like this would have been so cool back in 2002, man. There just weren't many games giving us good tie-in content with Episode 2, so even this little bit is kind of satisfying in a way. Although the level itself can be a bit dull, as it relies super heavily on just killing the same kind of enemies repeatedly for over 10 minutes. Blowing up the Trade Federation core ship is super cool, and destroying the spider droids and hailfire tanks was awesome for the first 5 or 6 minutes, but that's kind of all you do for a while, with a dose of Starfighter sprinkled in to deal with throughout on repeat for way too long. That's a minor critique though, and I did still like this level for what it is, although the direct ties to Episode 2 kinda end here, and the game resumes its own narrative again once this is over. which is kind of a shame since the first game made a far bigger deal out of the Phantom Menace's final battle, and we already saw way more of that battle in its respective film. The Battle of Geonosis not only had the potential to be way bigger and better than that one was, but also saw less screen time in the movie, meaning they both could and should have gone so much harder on this final battle than this short, repetitive escort-style level. Back on Locke, we get Nim's climactic final mission where he and his Revenant crew stage an assault on a Trade Federation refueling station that's been built on top of their former base. Again, the one they self-destructed in the last game. There's a lot of things stuffed into this level too. First off, Vanna Sage from the first game is back as a friendly NPC who fights alongside us, which is actually pretty cool. I liked having her come back, even if only for one level.
I knew you'd make it.
Wouldn't miss it. Where's Reddy?
Have to tell you about that later. Right now we got droids to demolish.
Rhys Dallows was apparently intended to answer the call to aid Nim here as well, but this was cut during development. I actually agree with this decision though, because Rhys got his due in the first game, and it wouldn't have made a lot of sense for him to help out a random pirate he met and worked with like twice over 10 years ago. Not to mention it wouldn't make much sense for Nim to reach out to Rhys in the first place, given they barely knew each other beyond the very minor interactions we saw in the first game. Vanna, on the other hand, already had a prior relationship with Nim in the first game, and is a mercenary anyway, so both him reaching out to her and her showing up here makes perfect sense. As for the level, it's definitely one of the longest ones across both games. We get to use the orbital cannon we fought to secure a few levels ago by selecting a target and telling it to fire. Although this is really only useful for these refueling stations and a few of the freighters, so it's kind of a gimmick, but it is a cool gimmick though.
It's nice having the heavy artillery on our side for a change.
After escorting your own ships to land and guarding some speeders to blow open the front door of the base, we enter and make short work of the base's defenses. This is where we get our penultimate boss battle. Remember that Twi'lek I brought up earlier, Lieutenant Bella? Well, it turns out that both Captain Kavik Toth and Bella have been hiding out in this base the whole time. Toth makes a break for it and Vanna follows after him, but Nim and Bella have a showdown where he has to kill her at the end of this level.
Stabilizer's failing! Abandoned ship! Ah!
After that, we're thrown back over to Jedi Master Adi Gallia as she and Ciri have left the Geonosis atmosphere to go and face down the last of Saboth Squadron in one final space battle to prevent Toth from launching what's left of his Triexelon missiles onto Geonosis and eradicate their forces.
Master Gallia, this is Mace Windu.
Yes, Master Windu?
These hex deployers must be stopped. We cannot allow them to jeopardize our operations on Geonosis.
I do love this bit where we see all of the Jedi flying around on their starfighters like this. So cool. Other than that though, all we really do is blow up roughly a dozen Saboth frigates and even more fighters across the battle. It is still pretty cool to play though, and is for sure the longest mission across both games. The last thing we do is fight Kavik Toth one-on-one as Adi Gallia blows him into stardust.
No!
With Toth and Bella dead and the last of Saboth Squadron eradicated, the story of Jedi Starfighter comes to a quiet close as Adi Gallia meets with Mace Windu back on Coruscant for a debriefing on the situation. Windu tells her that Nim was offered a position as a representative of the Carthax system and that he declined, but that she is to remain in contact with him as a Jedi advisor, a choice which he actually accepts and does make him an ally to the Jedi in that capacity. Lastly, we see Vanna Sage again as she reaches out to tell Nim that she's found a trace on Reddy's signal, but that he's switched off his comms. She then says she's going to try and find him, and Vanna and Nim wish her luck and offer help if she needs, leaving Jedi Starfighter's conclusion setting up for a sequel that would never come. Overall, I actually do really like this game a lot. It's loaded with a lot of passion, charm, and sincerity, it doesn't overstay its welcome, and most importantly, it's a lot of fun to play. It doesn't do a lot, but what it does do, it does very well. With that said though, I have a few issues with the story that I want to talk about for a minute. For the most part, I have very much enjoyed the story of Jedi Starfighter. Adi Gallia is a great character, and her portrayal in this game makes her an even better protagonist. Her lines range between fun banter with the other characters and believably stoic as would be expected from the wisdom of a Jedi Master. Ciri's inclusion is also such an incredible and often overlooked addition that solidifies this game as a must-play for fans of the EU, given that I'm pretty sure it's her only non-literature appearance. and if anything, she was underutilized in this game. Kavik Toth, Lieutenant Bella, and the Saboth Squadron make for a pretty one-note antagonist faction, but serve their purpose more than well enough to fit snugly into the world this game is giving us, and I'm totally fine with how both their faction and the Trihexalon plotline was handled. What I don't like is Nim.
What? Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
I don't like his inclusion, his dialogue, his ship, his levels, his subplot. I really just straight up do not like this character or his role in this game. The whole "I'm a roguish pirate with a heart of gold" is the start, middle, and end of his personality, and he literally never experiences a character arc in this game. Him reluctantly deciding to help when things get real was already who he was in the first game, and when they had the chance to show he has grown and let him accept a more profound role in the galaxy beyond Space Pirate, they botched it to keep him the exact same as before.
We offered him a post as commander of the Carthax system.
He declined.
Yes.
Which was apparently the point of his character in the first game, according to an interview with the game's writer, Hayden Blackman. Him choosing to leave and remain a pirate at the end of Starfighter was to make him kind of an anti-Han. In the first game, I think this was fine, because he was one of 3 protagonists. You only had to play as him for like 30% of that game, and he acted as more of a supporting character than a main one, which is where this character works best, as a supporting character. And since all 3 of them were supporting each other, them coming together and working towards a common cause served as enough of a character arc for all of them. The only problem is that he's not a supporting character in this game. In fact, he's kind of like the overall main character. We do technically play as Addie more than Nim by 1 mission, but even most of her missions are related to helping Nim in his quest to reclaim his old home base on Locke from the Trade Federation. The Trihexalon subplot is something he kind of begrudgingly agrees to participate in and treats more like a distraction than anything else. The Saboth Squadron are the main antagonists of the game, but their involvement in the story is to make the aforementioned Trihexalon weapons for Count Dooku. And if they didn't just happen to be operating out of Nim's old base, then he wouldn't have had anything to do with the whole third act of the game beyond showing up at the very end.
That was not part of our agreement.
It's such a weird story. 85% of the driving force throughout the game is Nim making preparations to take back his old base, which makes him feel like the main character pretty much the entire time, while the actual primary story of the game feels like it's actively fighting against Nim's subplot to be told. I really think they should have resolved the Nim reclaiming his old base subplot in like a single mission near the end of Act 2, so they could have reoriented and put all of their focus into the A plot and had him participate in the Battle of Geonosis instead of having him off doing his own unrelated thing on Locke. The whole third act just feels super narratively jarring because you're playing out 2 almost totally unrelated climactic final battles across multiple missions between 2 separate characters. Swapping between multiple perspectives during the climax of a third act is something Lucas loves to do, as seen in The Phantom Menace, Revenge of the Sith, and Return of the Jedi. But when he does it, it's multiple perspectives of the same plot, not 2 different subplots loosely tied together by a thread. To put it simply, the game is trying to have its cake and eat it too, and it doesn't really work in my opinion. The first Starfighter game felt like it managed to tell a unique story that interwove itself with the film that it was tying into, and featured a plot that enriched the movie by contributing a narrative that expands on the film throughout a series of separate subplots that end up all coming together and fully merging back into the movie in the end. Jedi Starfighter, on the other hand, is telling its own brand new story that's nearly totally disconnected from the events of the movie it's tying into until the very end, where it quickly jumps in to coincide with Attack of the Clones for like 2 missions, and arguably at the expense of its own plot, I should add, and then dips out to go back to its own thing again. I suspect this is because the first game was developed after The Phantom Menace had already been released, which meant the developers could more easily reference their source material, whereas the second game was being developed alongside the second film, and I'm not sure how much of the story or assets the team even had access to, or more importantly, when they got access to it at all. It's possible they had to spend most of their development time working on their own original story because they weren't given access to what Attack of the Clones would entail until later in development, and then had to squeeze it in near the end. The Geonosis levels strike me as late-game additions thrown together when the team was already closing in on their deadline to be done, but that's just my speculation. Speculation that I'm offering to potentially explain why these issues exist, but not to justify them, because I do think that the story could have been handled better. But enough about the story, let's talk about gameplay.
That's why I'm here.
If you watched my coverage on the first game, then you'll know there's not much new to say now. Jedi Starfighter plays exactly the same as its predecessor, but with one major new addition in the form of Addie's Force abilities. While piloting her Starfighter, Addie can call upon the Force in the form of a Force Shield, which envelops her ship in a bubble to prevent damage, Force Reflex, which basically slows time way down, acting as a sort of bullet time, and is 100% the single most useful, bordering on game-breaking mechanic in the game, Force Shockwave, which is the ability I talked about earlier in the asteroid belt in Geonosis, and I rarely used it, but it is cool to look at. And lastly, Force Lightning, which can insta-kill multiple enemies without even seeing where they are so long as you have them targeted. Not only is this my favorite power in the game just because of how fun it is, but between this and her former red lightsaber, it's not helping the Darth Adi Gallia allegations. Using these powers is a lot of fun because their efficacy is determined by how long you hold the button, so if you hold it for too long or not long enough, you'll reduce the damage or time of the power. You really want to learn the right amount of time to hold the button to maximize their usage in combat. Also, the amount of fun these force powers added to the game only served to make playing Nim's missions more annoying to me. And while we're kind of on the topic of the Jedi Starfighter, I need to circle back to something I mentioned earlier.
Look! Did you see that? What?
If you're not seeing what I'm pointing out, then you're a normal person. If you are seeing it, then I'm sorry to be the one to inform you that you're a massive nerd.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, the Delta 7 Aether Sprite class fighters didn't have hyperdrives, except when they did. See, the sleek design of these ships meant that a hyperdrive wouldn't fit, which is why Obi-Wan had to dock his Starfighter to a Silear 31 hyperspace docking ring in order to travel long distances, as seen in the film. Although according to the wiki, there were prototype versions of the ship that featured hyperdrives, which I assume is to account for appearances like the one in this game. But this only means there's no reason they shouldn't have been integrated in the first place, since not only is it possible, but Addie and Mace praised the design and capability of her ship, that features a built-in hyperdrive, repeatedly throughout the game, making it weird that some models have it, but others don't because they supposedly can't, even though they're all designed the exact same way. I just had to point it out because when I was playing, I found myself wondering how she was making the jump to hyperspace without the ring. It'd have been cooler if we did see the hyperspace ring in the game, but also I get there's probably plenty of reasons why that didn't happen. Once you've wrapped up with the main single-player story mode, there are some bonus missions to play through as well, which can be unlocked by completing all of the hidden and bonus objectives in every level. Or just using a cheat code, of course. There are 9 of these bonus levels in total, some playable both in single and multiplayer, and a few exclusive to their respective player mode. The first of these is called Escort Duty, where we defend a small fleet of ships from a massive number of enemy starfighter squadrons that get spawned randomly as the mission progresses. The cool thing about this mission is that since the enemies you fight are spawned in randomly, you can potentially fight a bunch of the different fighters from the first game that you don't really see in the main story of this one. I've read that sometimes you may even see X-Wings or TIE fighters, but this instance did not occur for me. Advanced Prototype Test is just an additional training level that's a bit harder than the other training levels, with more complicated challenges like taking fighters out from a distance or surviving an onslaught of fighters for 45 seconds. Riding Shotgun is an on-rails level, putting the player in the turret gunner seat of Nim's Havoc Bomber and letting you shoot down a bunch of enemies. It's pretty cool, and this is actually utilized in the game's co-op mode as well. Oh yeah, the story mode can be played fully co-op, which is very cool, and this is what Player 2 does in Nim's missions. The lone gunship puts you in the cockpit of a low-altitude assault transport, or LAAT, during the Battle of Geonosis, and it's very similar to the Attack of the Clones level from the story, but without the escort portion. You just fly around and blow things up in the LAAT, but the vehicle itself is so cool that it more than justifies the level. I mean, the pinpoint laser turrets are devastatingly powerful, and I love these things. The mission, simply titled Jango Fett, is probably the most interesting and legitimate of all the hidden levels, giving us control of the Slave One as we fight through to a space station to collect a bounty on a smuggler named Race Cartan. The dogfight against Cartan's ship called the Duergo, we don't hear it said in game, so I'm just guessing that's how it's said, is pretty good. He even beat me on my first attempt. Also, in an Easter egg, you can find Reddy hiding on one of these asteroids where he'll pop out and attack you before fleeing again. The wiki suggests this instance may have been what led to Reddy's bounty, but it's possible that it took place after Reddy ran, but before the end of the game, somewhere between the Hammer and Anvil mission and the Attack of the Clones mission. It couldn't be after that because, well, you know. The game never clarifies which it is though, and Reddy's appearance here is more like an Easter egg anyway. Coruscant Cloudtops is a multiplayer-only level found exclusively in the Xbox port of the game, and I couldn't get it to work on my emulator, so unfortunately, I don't have footage of it. But looks super cool though, I'd love to play this someday. Classic Dogfight is a multiplayer versus mode where one player is in an X-Wing and another is in a TIE fighter, and the two battle it out. There's lots of NPCs of both fighter types too, which is really cool, and this is a fun little bonus to incorporate the original trilogy. Droid Hunter is also a multiplayer-only mission where players compete to prevent enemy ships from making it to the so-called teleportation orb. One player is given a ship called the Freefall though, which belongs to Jenkins from the campaign, and its primary fire is unreasonably overpowered. Great ship though. And lastly, Showdown over Geonosis is the final multiplayer-only mission and the final of the bonus missions where it's a classic 1v1 to recreate the asteroid chase scene from Attack of the Clones where Jango tries to kill Obi-Wan. Simple, but still pretty cool. Oh yeah, and there's a few training missions available before you start the main story where Jedi Master Saisi Teen teaches the player how to play the game, but outside of it being cool to play above Coruscant like this, there's nothing notable about these missions.
McConkey.
The last thing I want to talk about is the Starfighter Crossbones comic run. Starfighter Crossbones is a 3-issue run of comic books taking place between the two games and written explicitly to lead into Jedi Starfighter in particular. If you're planning to play Jedi Starfighter, I do recommend reading this before, but after is just fine too. This run is notable for the fact that it includes nearly no human characters, focusing almost entirely on a variety of different aliens, particularly, of course, Nim. This was by design, in fact, as it was actually requested that the illustrator, Ramon F. Box, not depict any humans in the art beyond Vanna Sage's cameo in the first issue and both Vanna and Rhys Dallows in a flashback panel. A single human did make it in upon Ramon putting Star Wars fan Skippy Farleston Dorio, hoping I said that right, in a single panel, which is great. The majority of the story is about Nim's rivalry with his more violent pirate counterpart named Sol Sixa, and the two really have it out for each other across the 3 issues. In an interview about the series, author Hayden Blackman stated that he adores pirate history and media, claiming that this influenced both the character of Nim and the story of the series in general. It shows too, because despite being a story about space pirates, most of the story takes place on the water planet of Maramir, which makes everything feel even more like a classic pirate tale than it already did. I didn't talk about his role in the game story because it's pretty minimal, but Sol Sixa does show up and play a minor role in assisting Nim across multiple missions in Jedi Starfighter after they put their differences aside from this comic run. He even helps out in the final battle against Kavik Toth above Geonosis and in the siege to take back the Revenant base on Locke. He's one of the guys on a speeder that blows the front door open. In the comic series though, he's pretty much the main antagonist for the 2nd and 3rd issue until near the end where they form a truce and eventually agree to work together against the Trade Federation. I know I said earlier that I don't like Nim as a character, but the truth is that I really just didn't like him in this game. I mean, he's still not my favorite character, but I did enjoy his role in these comics. It's a cool little 3-issue run. If you're a Star Wars fan, then it makes a great little venture into a fun, self-contained story. It's made up almost entirely of unique characters and locations, which is super refreshing in a universe all too known for reusing pre-established things a little too much. Starfighter Crossbones is cool, and not only do I like it a lot, I just appreciate its existence for what it is.
It seems to work.
As for the game those comics were tying into, I know I was a bit harsh on its narrative, but do keep in mind that my frustration was totally subjective. If you're a fan of Nim as a character, then you'll probably love this game, or even if you're just a fan of arcade-style vehicle combat games like I am. I still love this game, and I had such a fun time playing it that even thinking back on my time makes me even more disappointed than before of the lack of any kind of PC port, which is where my bringing up a remaster comes into play. The first Starfighter would be a good choice of remaster, but it already has a PC port, albeit a very poorly aged one, but it can also be flawlessly emulated on PS2 and Xbox, which are more than good enough ways to experience it. Jedi Starfighter, on the other hand, has yet to see any kind of PC port, and even its more modern ports to the PS4 and 5 reportedly run the risk of facing that one game-breaking glitch that soft locks you due to those ports leaning on emulation. Outside of analog hardware, there's no good way to play this game, and that sucks. Sure, I was a bit critical of how the narrative was handled, but it's still a very fun story, and one of only a few proper tie-ins with Attack of the Clones, which makes it even more special. Not to mention that the only way to play the Coruscant Cloudtops mission is to have an Xbox on hand, which not everyone has these days. Also, just playing the game is a total blast in general, especially the missions involving the Jedi Starfighter itself. I would love to play through a polished up version of this game and secure a proper 100% on its Steam achievements if I ever could, because it's in such a sweet spot regarding its length, the rewarding nature of the gameplay loop, and the satisfaction when you manage to complete all of the optional objectives in a mission. It's a shame we never got that third game they were setting up for either, nor did we ever see what happened to Reddy after Vanna went looking for him. Maybe he retired and lived through the Clone Wars well into the Galactic Civil War in hiding, or maybe a bounty hunter finally got to him in the end. But what we do know is that it wasn't Jango, because